The mud was cold. 6 inches of it. I'd been lying in it for 4 hours, my face pressed so close to a rotting log I could count the termites. I hadn't moved. I hadn't blinked. I hadn't even scratched the leech that was currently feeding on my neck. Silence was our armor. The jungle, our cathedral. We heard them coming, not with our ears, but with our skin. The insects in the canopy, the ones that had been screaming for hours, suddenly went quiet. That silence rippled toward us, a wave of fear moving through the air. They were close. T-Roy, my point man, was a lump of mud 10 feet to my left. He was so still, a tree frog had mistaken his helmet for a rock. Then, the patrol emerged. 7 VC. Regulars. They were moving slow, AKs at the ready, but they were walking sloppy. They were looking for Marines. Marines are loud. They crash through brush. They carry heavy packs. They smell like bug repellent and canned peaches. They're a hammer. We weren't a hammer. We were the space between the atoms. One of them stopped. He was maybe 5 feet from me. 5. He scanned the mud bank, his eyes passing right over me, right over T-Roy, right over all 12 of us. He saw nothing. Just jungle. Just mud. He spit, shook his head, and motioned his men forward. They walked right through our formation. They stepped over Shorty Washington's legs. They passed so close to me I could smell the Nuak Mom on their breath. And we did nothing. We let them pass, we let them go. Our mission wasn't to kill that patrol. It was to follow them, to find the supply depot they were protecting. A depot 3 Marine companies had failed to find, because every time they got close, Charlie heard them coming a mile away. They never heard us. They never saw us. A week later, our long-range radio techs intercepted a message. A frantic VC commander begging regional command for reinforcements. He wasn't afraid of the Marines. He was terrified of the Maw, the phantoms, the ghosts that walked through his lines without making a sound. He said his men were disappearing. He was right. My name is Sergeant Elias Reaper Vance. The year was 1967. We were operating in the Central Highlands west of Pleiku. We were the Spectres. 1st Platoon, Charlie Company, 5th Recon. On paper, at least. Unofficially, we were the misfit platoon, the problem children. Every man in my unit was black. It was the Army's 1960s way of solving a personnel issue. Stick all the angry, mouthy, or just plain different brothers in one unit and give them the worst jobs. They sent us on ghost missions, pointless patrols to draw fire, or suicide runs to test enemy defenses. They thought they were punishing us, but they didn't realize who they'd put together. They hadn't just assembled a platoon of black soldiers. They'd assembled 12 hunters from Georgia, 4 trackers from the Louisiana Bayou, and a handful of the quietest, meanest inner-city kids from Chicago and Detroit. We didn't know how to be Army, but we knew how to be invisible. While the Marine companies were running search and destroy with mortars and air support, we were running search and disappear. We moved at night. We carried half the gear. We lived in the mud. We didn't talk. And the VC, who were masters of jungle warfare, suddenly found themselves being hunted in their own backyard. By us. They were trained to fight the hammer. They had no defense against the ghosts. Our ghost status wasn't a secret. It was a joke. We were attached to a Marine expeditionary force near Jakto. The Marines, mostly white kids from the suburbs, 19 years old and full of John Wayne, treated us with a mix of suspicion and pity. They were the mighty, and we were the janitors. It started with the maps. A Marine lieutenant, a fresh-faced kid named Henderson, was briefing us in the command tent. The air was hot, thick, and smelled of canvas and diesel. He was pointing at a topo map with a piece of bamboo. "All right, gentlemen," he said, his eyes sliding right over us. He was talking to his Marine squad leaders, even though we were the ones running the op. "The situation is this. Charlie Company has been trying to secure Hill 724 for 3 weeks. Every time they get within 500 meters, they walk into a meat grinder. Mortars, machine gun nests, the whole 9 yards. They've taken 40% casualties." He tapped the map. "Intel says there's a major VC supply depot in this valley, feeding 724. We can't find it. The flyboys can't see it. Every patrol we send in gets cut to pieces." He finally looked at me. His eyes were pale, bored. "Which is where you come in, Sergeant Vance. Your platoon will conduct a reconnaissance in force toward this ridge." He tapped an area miles away from the actual objective. "You are to make contact, draw fire, and fix the enemy's position so my Marines can flank. I just stared at him. I didn't blink. Reconnaissance in force. T-Roy whispered next to me, so quiet only I could hear. That's a new one. Back in Bama, we just called that being the bait. What's that, Corporal? Henderson snapped. His authority pricked. Nothing, sir, T-Roy said, his face a perfect neutral mask. Just happy to be here. Good. You move out at 0400. My men will be in position here waiting for you to light 'em up. He dismissed us with a wave. We walked out of the tent into the sticky pre-monsoon air. My men were already gathered, checking their gear. They'd heard the scuttlebutt. They knew. So we the bait, Reaper? Shorty, Washington asked. He was our M60 gunner. A man built like a refrigerator who could carry that pig all day and not break a sweat. We ain't bait, I said, pulling them in close. Bait gets eaten. Bait is loud. Bait is stupid. Lieutenant Henderson wants us to go crashing through the jungle looking for a fight. He wants us to make contact, and we will. Just not his way. I unrolled my own map, the one I'd spent 3 nights staring at. He wants us to go here, I said, pointing to the ridge. He thinks the VC are on the ridge, but they're not. Look at the water. My men leaned in. They knew what I was looking at. Back home, you hunt, you look for water. You look for the paths of least resistance. The Marines, I said, are crashing against Hill 724. That's the front door. They're sending patrols into this valley and they're following the trails. They're loud. The VC hear 'em, set up and mow 'em down. They're fighting like it's World War II. They're looking for an army. I traced a finger along a tiny, almost invisible stream that ran behind Hill 724. But Charlie ain't an army. He's a hunter, and a hunter needs to eat. He needs to drink. He's not putting his supply depot where the Marines are looking. He's putting it where he can get to it quiet. He's putting it here. My finger landed on a convergence of 3 tiny streams hidden in a patch of triple canopy jungle, a place the maps called the Green Hell. It was 2 clicks past the hill in the opposite direction of our mission. That's our objective, I said. Not the ridge, not drawing fire. We're going to find that depot. We're going to walk around their entire defense, and we're going to do it so quiet. They don't even know we're in the same country. What about the lieutenant? Preach, our medic asked. He was a quiet, church-going kid from Chicago, but he was the moral compass of the platoon. We're disobeying a direct order, Reaper. We're interpreting a direct order, Preach, I said, my voice hard. The order is to make contact and fix the enemy's position. He just told us the wrong place to look. We'll make contact, all right, but we're going to do it on our terms. We're going to give him the real enemy position, and we're all coming home to do it. I looked at my men, 12 faces, hard in the firelight, 12 men who had been set up to fail. This ain't the Marines, I said. This ain't a John Wayne movie. We're not taking the hill, we're not charging machine gun nests, we're going to be ghosts, you get me? They nodded. We get you, Reaper. Good. Gear check. Heavy. Heavy was our code. It meant drop everything. We weren't Marines and we didn't pack like 'em. They carried 90-pound rucks with extra uniforms, canned food, entrenching tools, helmets. They were prepared for a siege. We were hunters. We carried water, ammo, and morphine. That's it. We ditched the steel pot helmets. They were loud. We wore boonie hats or just bandanas, which we called silence caps. We ditched the flak jackets. They were heavy, hot, and noisy. We ditched the canned rations. The clink of a P-38 can opener could get you killed. We carried LRRPs, long-range reconnaissance patrol rations, freeze-dried bricks of sadness that you softened in your mouth. We taped everything. Sling swivels, dog tags, canteen caps. T-Roy had his men weave strips of jungle cloth into their webbing to break up their outlines. We looked less like soldiers and more like creatures, like part of the landscape. At 0300, 1 hour before Henderson's mission time, we were at the wire. A Marine sentry, a kid with acne, looked us over. Christ, you guys travel light, he muttered. Where's your helmet, Sarge? Don't need 'em where we're going, kid, I said. Keeps your head down. Roger that. Y'all are moving out to the ridge, right? Heard they got a real hornet's nest out there. Good luck. We'll be fine, I said. You just listen for the boom. We slipped out of the wire, not as a platoon, but as 12 individual shadows. We didn't form a line. We melted into the jungle, one by one. The plan was simple. Move 5 clicks north, parallel to the Marine front, then cut east, deep into the black, toward the stream I'd marked. The jungle at night is a different world. It's alive. The heat doesn't go away, it just gets wetter. And the sounds try to drive you insane. Every rustle is a VC, every snap is a booby trap. The Marines hated the night. They'd send up flares, a nervous, flickering light that just told everyone where they were. We thrived in it. My men moved like shadows because they were shadows. T-Roy was on point. He didn't use a flashlight. He didn't need one. He was from the bayou. He said he could smell the difference between cut branches and rotten wood. He moved by feeling the air, by sensing the lanes in the jungle. We moved in 15-meter spreads so far apart we couldn't see each other. We communicated by touch or by the slightest sound. A slow click of the tongue from T-Roy meant hold. 2 clicks meant danger, get invisible. We crossed a stream, not by crashing through it, but by finding a log upstream and crossing one by one, cleaning our mud as we went, leaving no trail. We were 4 clicks in when T-Roy gave the signal. 1 click. Hold. I froze. The whole platoon froze. I didn't even breathe. I just listened. I heard it. Thump, 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 thump. It was the sound of a hammer. A big, clumsy, American hammer. Marines. I crawled up to T-Roy. He was pointing, not with his hand, but with his chin. Through the pre-dawn gloom, we saw them. A Marine platoon, maybe 20 men. It must have been Henderson's flank. They were 500 meters to our right, moving toward our old objective, the ridge, and they were making a sound like a parade. Canteens sloshing, boots pounding the mud, a radio man whispering static. Damn, Reaper, T-Roy breathed in my ear. They're gonna get everybody in this valley killed. And as the sun began to turn the black sky to a sick gray purple, we heard the first sound. Thwump. It was a mortar. A VC mortar. They walked right into it, I whispered. The sound of the first explosion, a dull crump, echoed across the valley, followed by the sudden, panicked rat-a-tat-tat of an M16. The Marines had found their fight. Henderson's bait had been taken. But it wasn't us. That ain't our fight, I said, tapping T-Roy on the shoulder. Let's go. Get us to that stream. While the entire jungle to our right erupted in gunfire, a private war for a useless piece of rock, we turned east. 12 men, silent as the fog, walking away from the noise. We slipped into the shadows, heading for the real prize. We were ghosts, and the war had just started. The sound of the Marines' war followed us for a full hour, a distant, angry popping like popcorn catching fire. Thump, crump, rat-a-tat-tat. It was the sound of a hammer hitting a rock. Useless. We were 500 meters into the green hell, and that sound was already a different universe. Our war was silent. This was the part of the job that no one understood, the part that didn't go into the after-action reports. It wasn't about the firefights. It was about the nothing. It was about the 4 hours of agonizing slow-motion movement that covered 100 yards. T-Roy was on point. He wasn't walking. He was drifting. We called it the ghost walk. You don't walk heel to toe. You don't walk at all. You flow. You put your foot down, not on the ground, but into it. You test the earth. Is it a twig? A dry leaf? A loose rock? You pause, your weight on your back foot, your front foot hovering. You find the soft earth, the mud, the moss. Then and only then do you slowly transfer your weight. It's like walking on rice paper. A Marine platoon could cover a click in 30 minutes. It took us 4 hours. I was in the center, Reaper, in the middle of the ghosts. I watched T-Roy. He was a small man, T-Roy, but in the jungle he was a giant. He stopped. No signal, no click. He just stopped. I froze. Behind me, I knew. Preach had frozen. Shorty Washington with his 25-pound M60 had frozen, and he wouldn't even be breathing hard. The whole 12-man column just ceased to exist. I scanned T-Roy's line of sight. Nothing. Just a wall of green. A curtain of bamboo and wait a minute vines so thick it blotted out the sun. The air was dead. No birds. No insects. Just us, and the hammering of my own heart in my ears. T-Roy slowly, sank to one knee. He didn't bend. He just folded. He reached out, his hand moving like a snake, palm down. He pointed at the mud. I slithered up next to him. It took me a full 2 minutes to move 5 feet. He was pointing at a shadow. At first I didn't see it. It was just mud. Then my eyes focused. It wasn't a shadow, it was a wire. Thin, black, stretched about 4 inches off the ground, anchored to a bamboo stake on one side and disappearing into a thicket on the other. It wasn't a booby trap, not a grenade. It was too flimsy. T-Roy looked at me, his eyes wide. He mouthed the word, bell, an alarm, a simple, stupid cowbell, or a string of sea ration cans, something to make a sound to tell the hunters that the hammers were here. The Marines would have tripped it, and the world would have ended. T-Roy didn't cut the wire. Cutting it would spring it, make it ring. He did something I'd never seen before. He pulled his K-bar knife, not for the blade, but for the handle. He lay on his stomach, the mud sucking at his fatigues, and he began to dig under the wire with the knife's pommel. He was digging a trench, a tiny 1-inch deep trench for us to crawl under. It took him 20 minutes. He dug, scraped, and pushed the mud aside with his bare hands. When he was done, he looked back. He didn't nod. He just went under. A snake in the grass. One by one, the 12 of us went on our bellies and crawled under a single, stupid wire. It took an hour to move 3 feet. Shorty Washington was the last one. He was our biggest man. He had the M60. I watched him. He took the pig off his shoulder, pushed it in front of him, sliding it on the mud. He let out his breath and he seemed to shrink. He became flat. He slid under, his face a mask of concentration, his muscles bulging. He didn't make a sound. When we were all through, we reformed. T-Roy just stood up, a man made of mud, and kept walking. That was our war. No glory, no medals. Just an hour of agonizing work to defeat a piece of string. We moved deeper. The jungle changed. The green hell was a good name for it. The canopy was so thick the sun was just a rumor. It was a world of green and black, and the smell. Rot. Sweet, sickly rot. Everything was dying and being born at the same time. The ground was a carpet of things that bit. Red ants, leeches, spiders I didn't have names for. Preach, our medic, was behind me. I felt a tap on my shoulder. The signal for medic. I stopped, became a tree. He slid up. He was pointing at his own neck. A leech, a big, black, shiny one, was burrowed into the side of his neck, fat and swollen with his blood. Preach's face was calm. He just pointed. My instinct was to grab it, yank it off, but that was the wrong move. Yank it, and the head stays in. It gets infected. In the jungle, an infection will kill you faster than a bullet. I signaled for the man behind Preach to cover his sector. I unhooked my canteen, took the cap off with a slow, agonizing squeeze to keep it from popping. I poured a little water on my fingers and took out my silence tool, a book of matches wrapped in a piece of oiled cloth. I slid one out. I didn't strike it. I just touched the head of the match to the leech. The sulfur. The leech recoiled. It hated the sulfur. It pulled its own head out of Preach's skin, twisted, and fell into my hand. I didn't drop it. I didn't throw it. I placed it on a leaf, then covered it with another leaf. No trace. No blood. Preach touched the spot on his neck, felt the small pinprick of blood, and nodded. He slid a piece of freeze-dried beef jerky into his mouth, our lunch, and slid back into his spot. The whole operation took 5 minutes. Silent. Professional. We were ghosts. But ghosts get hungry. Ghosts get tired. My stomach was a tight, cold knot. We'd been moving for 10 hours. My shoulders ached from the weight of the ammo. My feet were wet, cold. I could feel the beginnings of immersion foot. The temptation, the scream in the back of my head, was to stop, to sit down, to tell the men to take 5. But I couldn't. If you stop, you get comfortable. If you get comfortable, you get lazy. If you get lazy, you make a sound. If you make a sound, you die. So we kept moving. We were a machine, a silent, 12-headed snake, wound tight with hunger and discipline. It was late afternoon. I knew because the quality of the green light around us had changed, grown dimmer. We had to be close. We'd been moving east for 7 hours. T-Roy stopped again. This time he didn't just freeze. He sniffed. He held up a fist. Halt. Then he held up 2 fingers, pointed them at his nose. Smell. I took a deep breath. Under the rot, under the mud, something else. Smoke. Not a campfire. Not a cooking fire. This was the stale, dead ash smell of a fire that had been put out hours ago. And something else. That sour, fishy tang. Nuok Mom. They were here. T-Roy pointed left. He was leaving the safe high ground and moving down, into the densest, ugliest part of the valley, toward the stream. This was the most dangerous part. We were giving up the high ground. We were walking into their kitchen. My heart felt like a trapped bird. Every instinct I'd learned at Fort Benning screamed, no, danger, ambush. But my other instincts, the ones I'd learned hunting in Georgia, said yes. The animal always goes to water. We go. I breathed. So quiet it was just air. The last 100 meters were a nightmare. It was a mangrove swamp. The mud wasn't just mud. It was a black, sucking, waist-deep soup. We had to use the tree roots, moving like spiders, hand over hand, our feet never touching the ground. Shorty Washington with his M60 was shaking with effort. I saw the muscle in his jaw pop, but he didn't make a sound. Then T-Roy, who was on a branch 10 feet in front of me, held up his hand. Halt. He didn't move for a full 5 minutes. He just was. Then he looked back at me. He didn't look scared. He didn't look excited. He just looked hungry. He pointed down. I crawled next to him, pushing a curtain of wet leaves aside, and I saw it. It wasn't a stream. It was a base. The stream I'd seen on the map was a tiny, muddy river, and the VC had built a village on it. Hoochies, dugouts, bunkers, all hidden under the triple canopy. There were trails, cleared firing fields, and a motor pool with 2 captured American jeeps. And there were men, dozens of them, maybe a full company. They were cleaning weapons, cooking rice, hanging laundry. This wasn't a supply depot. This was a command center. This was the hornet's nest. We were 12 ghosts, 100 yards from 100 sleeping hornets. And we were right on their front porch. My blood went cold. It didn't just run cold, it turned to ice. My heart stopped beating. My lungs forgot how to breathe. This was a nightmare. This was the F in FUBAR. We weren't on their porch. We were in their living room. The 100 yards I'd estimated was a joke. T-Roy was on a branch that hung directly over their motor pool. We were inside the perimeter. I looked at T-Roy. His face was the color of ash. He just slowly brought one finger up to his lips. Shh. Behind me, I could hear the slightest intake of breath from Preach. He'd seen it too. I didn't dare turn around. A head turn is a shout in a place this quiet. I did the only thing I could. I became a statue. A muddy, terrified statue. I closed my eyes for 1 second, opened them and told every muscle in my body to stop. We lay there, motionless. For 1 hour. We watched them. We learned their routine. There was a command hooch bigger than the others with a long radio antenna camouflaged as a dead tree. Men came and went from it, carrying maps. There was a mess hall, a cook stirring a massive vat of pho. There was a mortar pit, half covered by a tarp, with 3 men asleep next to the tubes. They were confident. This was their home. They had no sentries posted on this side. Why would they? No American patrol had ever gotten within 5 clicks of this place. No one could. No one but us. A VC soldier walked almost directly under me, heading for the stream to relieve himself. I could have spat on his hat. I held my breath. He did his business, zipped up, and walked back whistling. My left leg was on fire. A cramp, born of terror and tension, was seizing my entire thigh. It felt like a knife was being twisted in the muscle. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shift. I had to shift. I didn't. I just lay there. I let the pain wash over me. I focused on the man in the command hooch. I counted his stripes. I memorized his face. I let the pain become part of the jungle. I let it be. This was the hard lesson. This was the difference between us and the Marines. The Marines, finding themselves here, would have had 2 options. 1, open up, a glorious, suicidal blaze of glory. 2, call in an airstrike, danger close, and pray. Both were loud. Both were death. Both were hammers. We had no options. There was no airstrike. There was no radio call. Keying a handset here would be like setting off a bomb. We had only one path. Silence. We were ghosts. And ghosts don't fight. They watch. I needed to tell my men. But how? I couldn't move. I couldn't pass a signal. Then I felt it. A slow, steady tap, tap, tap on my boot. It was Preach. He was so close he'd just reached out his hand. It was our code. Not Army code. Our code. It was from the block, from the prison yards. Tap, tap, tap. Pause. Tap. It meant, we see. We hold. No action. We are ice. I reached my hand back, found his, and gave him one, slow squeeze. I copy. We are ice. He would pass it back. The squeeze would go from man to man, a silent, invisible chain of pure, cold discipline. We are here. We do not exist. For 2 more hours we lay there. We became part of the canopy. The pain in my leg was a dull, roaring fire. I was hungry. I was terrified. And I was furious. Furious at Henderson. Furious at the army. Furious at the world that had put my men, my brothers, in a position where our only option was to not exist. The sun began to set. The green light turned to a deep, dark blue. The VC in the camp started lighting small, hooded lanterns. They started a cooking fire. The smell of grilled pork and rice wafted up. It was agonizing. This was the new problem. Night. Night was our element. But not inside their camp. They had lanterns. They had sentries who would be looking for movement in the dark. We couldn't stay here, but we couldn't move. We were trapped. A new man came out of the command hooch. He was older. He wore a pith helmet, not a field cap. He had a sidearm. He was an officer, a hard target. He shouted an order. The men began to form up. Oh God, they're going on patrol. They're coming this way. My heart hammered. If they came up into the swamp, if they decided to check their back door, we were dead. T-Roy saw it too. He was looking at me, his eyes 2 white orbs in the mud-caked mask of his face. He was asking the question, "Now, Reaper? Do we fight now?" I shook my head. One tiny, sharp shake. No. We would die here before we made a sound. The VC platoon, maybe 30 men, formed up. They checked their weapons. The officer gave a speech. And then, they marched out. They marched out the front gate, toward Hill 724. Toward the sound of the Marines' war, which had started up again, a faint thump-thump in the distance. They were going out to hunt the hammers. They were leaving their nest, their command center, with a skeleton crew. My entire body flooded with a cold electric relief. They weren't coming for us. They didn't even know we were alive. I waited. Another hour. The camp was quiet. The main force was gone. Now, I looked at T-Roy. I didn't tap. I didn't move. I just looked. He understood. He began to move. Not back. Not the way we came. That was too dangerous. He started moving forward. He was moving through the camp. It was the single most insane, terrifying, brilliant thing I had ever seen. He was slithering from the branch, down the trunk of the tree into the shadows right next to the motor pool. He was using their noise to cover his. The generator. The cook pot. The 2 guards talking by the fire. He was a ghost. He reached the other side, a patch of black shadow near the latrine. He disappeared. He was out. One by one, we began to move. It was my turn. I unhooked my leg. The pain was a white-hot scream. I bit my tongue, tasted the salt of my own blood. I didn't make a sound. I slithered down the tree. I was 10 feet from a VC guard who was smoking a cigarette, his back to me. I could smell the tobacco. I put my hand in the mud. I placed my foot. I became a shadow. It took another hour. An hour for 12 men to move 100 yards through an active enemy command base. Shorty Washington, with his M60, was the last man. He was sweating so hard, it was raining off his face. But he was silent. A silent, 300-pound phantom. We regrouped in the jungle. A click passed the base. We didn't stop. We didn't rest. We just kept moving. We put 3 clicks between us and that camp before I finally held up a fist. We collapsed. We didn't speak. We just sat in the mud in the dark and trembled. Preach crawled over to me. He held out his canteen. I drank. The water was hot, plastic tasting. It was the best thing I'd ever tasted. "Reaper," he whispered. His voice was shaking. What was that?" I looked at my men. My brothers. They were caked in mud, bleeding from leeches, shaking from adrenaline and exhaustion. But they were all there. All 12. That, I whispered back, was the lesson. We ain't Marines. We ain't the hammer. They can never know we are here. "But the mission, Reaper," T-Roy said, his voice raspy. "Henderson, the depot." I looked at him. A slow, cold smile spread across my face. It wasn't a happy smile. It was a hungry smile. "The mission's over, T-Roy," I said. "We found the depot, we found the brain, and they just showed us the key." "What key?" "They're going out to fight the Marines. They're leaving the nest. We're not bait. We're not ghosts. Not anymore." I pulled out my map and a piece of red lens film for my flashlight. "We're the nightmares. We moved for 12 hours straight. No stops. We were running on pure, cold adrenaline and hate. We were moving with a purpose now. We didn't just crawl back. We hunted our way back using the same silent, invisible paths. We arrived at the wire of Jak To at 0300 the next night, 48 hours after we'd left. We looked like we'd been dug up from a grave. We weren't just dirty. We were encased. Dried black mud, leeches we hadn't bothered to burn off, torn fatigues and thousand-yard stares. The Marine sentry who'd wished us luck almost shot us. "Halt! Who the f—" He stopped, lowering his M16. "Christ, is that Sergeant Vance?" "We're here, kid," I rasped. My voice sounded like gravel. "Tell the lieutenant." Lieutenant Henderson was not happy to be woken up. He was in the command tent, clean, in fresh fatigues, sipping coffee from a metal mug. He looked at us with pure, undisguised disgust. "You're a mess, Sergeant," he said, waving his hand in front of his nose. "And you're late. My men took a beating on that ridge." "We heard, sir," I said, my voice flat. "Did you make contact?" he demanded, pulling out his report board. "No, sir." "Did you draw their fire? Fix their position?" "No, sir." Henderson slammed his mug down. "Then what the hell did you do for 48 hours, Sergeant? Go swimming?" My men tensed. I could feel Shorty Washington's anger like a physical heat. T-Roy put his hand on Shorty's arm. "We are ice." "No, sir," I said, my voice just as cold, just as quiet. "We were busy. We found the hornet's nest, the real one, not the decoy on the ridge you sent your men to die on." I unrolled my map. It was stiff with dried mud. I dropped it on his clean table, smearing dirt all over his reports. "You sent us to find a supply depot," I said. "We found a battalion command center. 2 clicks past Hill 724. Here." I tapped the coordinates. "Motor pool, 3 mortar tubes, battalion-level radio gear, and a full company of VC regulars, plus their command staff." Henderson's face went from red to pale. He stared at the map. "That's impossible. That's inside our AO. We'd know." "You don't know, sir, because you've been hammering the front door," I said, my discipline cracking. "We came in the back window. We were inside their perimeter. We were 10 feet above their command hooch. We watched them eat dinner." Henderson was speechless. He was looking at me like I was insane. "You're lying, Sergeant." "Am I?" I reached into my fatigue pocket and pulled out a small, wet object. I tossed it on the map. It was a cloth bundle. "That's the command hooch's laundry," T-Roy said, his voice a dead monotone. "Pulled it off their clothesline. Figured the G2 boys might want to check the tags." Henderson stared at the bundle. He finally understood. We weren't lying. His entire demeanor changed. The boredom was gone. Now, he was buzzing. He was a predator who'd smelled blood. "This is it," he whispered. He grabbed his radio handset. "This is it. I'm calling division. We'll have arc light on that grid in 30 minutes. We'll wipe them off the map. B-52s. This is a career maker." I put my hand on the handset. A black sergeant, putting his hand on a white officer's radio. The entire tent went silent. The other Marines in the tent, the radio operators, they all stopped, their mouths open. "You do that, sir," I said, my voice dangerously quiet, "and you'll accomplish 2 things. 1, you'll kill a lot of trees. 2, you'll tell them exactly where we are and that we know they're there." "What are you talking about, Sergeant?" "We'll bomb them back to the Stone Age." "Sir, their main force isn't in the camp. We watch them. They move out at 1800 hours. Every night. They go out to hunt your men on Hill 724. You call in that airstrike, you'll kill a skeleton crew. A cook, maybe a few guards. The real fighters, the 100-man company, will be in the jungle. And when they come home and see a bunch of craters, they'll just move. They'll be gone. You'll have hit an empty nest and you'll never find them again." Henderson's face was a storm. He wanted the win. He wanted the boom. "So what's your brilliant plan, Sergeant?" He spat. "We just let them go?" I looked at my men. They were all looking at me. They were tired, they were hungry, but they were ready. This was it. This was what we were made for. "No, sir," I said. "We don't let them go. We cripple them. We haunt them. We make it so they never ever feel safe in their own home again." "How?" "We go back. Tonight. The main force moves out at 1800. That gives us a 6-hour window. We're not going to destroy the base. We're going to neuter it. We're not a hammer. We're a scalpel." My men, I said, my 12 ghosts, are going back in. We're not going to kill a single man if we can help it. That's the loud way. We're going to steal their maps. We're going to disable their mortars. We're going to sabotage their radios. We're going to poison their rice, and we're going to take their commander. Henderson's jaw dropped. Take? You mean kidnap? They're a snake, sir, I said. We're done stepping on its tail. We're going to cut off its head. While the rest of the snake is out hunting, we're going to walk into the nest, take the brain, and walk right back out. Henderson stared at me. He was a hammer, and I was describing brain surgery. He couldn't understand it. It's suicide, he said. It's suicide to send your men, sir. T. Roy chimed in, his voice respectful but sharp. They'll get caught at the wire. But we already know the way. We know the holes in their alarms. We know the guards' routine. We've already been through the living room. They're not expecting us. They're not expecting ghosts. I looked the lieutenant dead in the eye. Give us 6 hours, sir. Give us 6 hours and this entire valley will change. You want to stop the attacks on Hill 724? This is how. Let us go. Or, you can call in your bombs, hit those empty trees, and wonder why the body count keeps rising. Henderson looked at his shiny radio. He looked at the muddy, terrifying laundry on his map. He looked at the 12 skeletal, mud-caked phantoms standing in his tent. He picked up the laundry with 2 fingers, like it was a dead rat, and dropped it in a bag. You have 4 hours to refit, Sergeant, he said, his voice dead. Chow ammo explosives, be back at the wire at 1700. You're not on my books. This mission does not exist. If you get in trouble, no one is coming. If you're not back by 0400, you were never here. That's all we need, sir, I said. I turned to my men. All right, Spectres, I said, walking out of the tent into the daylight. Eat. Get your blades sharp. We're going back. Shorty Washington looked at me, a huge, terrifying grin splitting the mud on his face. It's huntin' season, Reaper, he said. No, Shorty, I replied, grabbing a fresh magazine. It's haunting season. At 1700 hours, we were ghosts again. We weren't just dirty. We were painted. We used handfuls of that black stinking mud to cover every inch of exposed skin. We looked like shadows, even in the daylight. We carried M16s, but the real weapons for this job were the K-bar knives, the garrots, and the 4 ounces of C4 explosive Preach had fashioned into silence charges for the radios. The mission was simple, insane, but simple. We were a scalpel, and we had 3 targets. The mortars. Shorty Washington and 2 other men were Team Piston. Their job, disable the 3 mortar tubes. Not blow them up. Just take the firing pins and the sight knobs. Useless. The radio. T. Roy and his 3 whisper specialists were to hit the command hooch. Not to kill. To steal. Get the code books, get the maps, and use Preach's C4 charges to melt the radio's guts without a sound. The officer. That left me, Preach, and 2 others. We were Team Headhunter. Our job was to find the commander we'd seen, the one in the pith helmet, and bring him home. Alive. And quiet. We slipped back into the green hell. We didn't have to hunt for the path this time. We knew the way. We moved with a speed that would have terrified a Marine. We moved through the swamp under the alarm wire and into the canopy above the base. It was 1900 hours. The main VC force had left at 1800, right on schedule. The base was quiet, sleepy. A skeleton crew of about 15 men. A few guards, some cooks, and our targets. We lay in the branches above the camp like 12 black panthers waiting. The air was cool. My heart was a block of ice in my chest. I wasn't scared. I was focused. This was the job. This was what we were made for. I gave the signal. A silent, slow wave of my hand. Go. One by one, my men dropped from the trees. They didn't hit the ground. They dropped into the deepest shadows. They dropped behind woodpiles into empty drainage ditches against the dark, wet walls of the hooches. In 30 seconds, all 12 of us were inside the perimeter. And no one, not the guard smoking by the gate, not the cook washing a pot, knew we were there. Shorty Washington and his team, 3 refrigerators in the dark, moved like cats toward the mortar pit. T. Roy and his team, covered in mud, slithered like snakes toward the command hooch. I watched. I waited. This was the hardest part. The waiting. A guard, a kid, walked from the gate, stretching. He was walking right toward T. Roy's position. T. Roy was flat in a shadow, not 10 feet away. The guard stopped, fumbled for a cigarette. I saw T-Roy's hand move. Not the knife, just his hand. He picked up a small pebble and, with a flick of his wrist, tossed it onto the roof of a hooch 20 feet to his left. Tink. The guard's head snapped toward the sound. He raised his AK, listening. He heard nothing. He shrugged, thinking it was a rat, and walked away from T-Roy toward the sound. T-Roy was in. He slid inside the command hooch without a sound. On the other side of the camp, Shorty Washington was at the mortar pit. The 3 VC crewmen were asleep, just as we'd seen. Shorty was a force of nature. He didn't use a knife. He moved over the men, his massive hands covering the mouth and nose of the first guard. It wasn't a violent kill. It was just an ending, a pressure. The man didn't even twitch. His 2 partners did the same. 3 guards dead without a single shot. Silence. Shorty got to work. He wasn't just a gunner. He was a mechanic. We heard the faint snick of metal as he disassembled the mortar's firing mechanisms. 2 targets down. It was our turn. I, Preach, and my 2 men moved toward the hooch I'd tagged as the officers' quarters. We moved in shadow steps. I'd move, freeze. Preach would move, freeze. We were 4 disjointed pieces of the night. We reached the hooch, a bamboo shack. 1 guard, sitting on a stool by the door, his head nodding. He was half asleep. This was Preach's job. Preach was our medic, but he was also our mercy. He slid up behind the man. His hand was a blur. It wasn't a knife. It was a syringe of morphine. Not just one. A triple dose. He didn't stab the guy. He just stuck him in the neck. The guard's eyes went wide. He gasped, a tiny hiccup. Preach held him gently, like a friend, easing him to the ground as the overdose took him. He'd just go to sleep. Forever. Silent. I went in the door. The officer was there. He was at a small table, reading a map by a single candle. He was in his undershirt. His pith helmet was on the table. He heard me, or felt me. He looked up. His eyes. That's what I remember. He wasn't scared. He was furious. He opened his mouth to shout. I crossed the 10-foot room in 1 step. I wasn't a ghost. I was a storm. My left hand clamped over his mouth, my right hand holding a gag snapped around his head. He fought. He was strong. He bit my hand, drawing blood. He kicked, trying to knock over the table. Preach was right behind me, with another syringe, but not a triple dose. A half dose. Just enough to make him groggy. He jammed it into the officer's thigh. The officer shuddered. The fight went out of him. His eyes rolled, but he didn't pass out. He was awake. He was just pliable. We have him. I tied his hands. I put my K-bar to his ribs. I didn't have to speak. He understood. Make a sound, you die. We were done. Total time in camp, 4 minutes. I gave the signal, a low-pitched bird call. The all clear. T-Roy and his men emerged from the radio hooch. They were carrying a heavy satchel. The maps, the code books. Behind them, a thin wisp of chemical smoke curled from the hooch. The C4 charge. The radio was melted. Shorty's team emerged from the mortar pit. He was carrying his M60 in one hand and 3 mortar firing pins in the other, jingling like keys. We met at the exfil point, the swampy bank we'd crawled in from. We were 13 men now. The officer was our problem. We couldn't carry him. He had to walk. I put the knife to his back. I pointed. Walk. He walked. He was smart. He knew he was surrounded. He knew his camp was blind, deaf, and disarmed. And he knew his main force was miles away. We moved. We moved fast. We were loud now. We were crashing. We had to. We were on a clock. Henderson's clock. 0400. We were 2 clicks out when we heard it. A shout. Then another. Then a single lonely pop, pop, pop from an AK. They'd found the guard. They'd found the radio. They knew. Go, I yelled, shoving the officer. Go, go, go. We weren't ghosts anymore. We were running. We were crashing through the jungle, 13 men running for our lives. Behind us, the jungle came alive. They were popping flares, green, white, red. They were angry. They were hunting us. We ran. Shorty Washington, with his 60-pound M60 and 200 rounds of ammo, was at the back. He was our rear guard. They're coming, Reaper, he yelled, his voice a ragged gasp. They're fast. Don't look back. Just run. We hit the stream, the one we'd crossed so silently 48 hours ago. We didn't cross it. We ran through it, the water exploding around us. That's when they opened up. An RPD machine gun, firing wild. The rounds snapped over our heads, crack, crack, crack like a bullwhip. "Preach, get the package to the rally point," I yelled. "Shorty, lay it down." Shorty Washington didn't need to be told. He stopped, spun, and in one motion, dropped to a knee. He became the refrigerator. "Get him off me," he roared, and he pulled the trigger on the M60. The sound was the most beautiful thing I'd ever heard. It was a roar. Brrrr-tee! A stream of red tracers cut the night in half, ripping into the trees where the RPD was firing. The VC gun went silent. "Shorty, let's go!" I screamed. "Go! I'm right behind you!" He was laying down a wall of steel, 100 rounds at a time. He was buying us seconds. We ran. We ran until our lungs were on fire. We ran until the mud felt like cement. We ran until we hit the American wire. "Friendly! Friendly! Friendly!" I screamed, holding up my hands. The Marine sentry, the same kid, just stared. Jesus. Jesus H. Christ. We poured over the wire, 11 of us and the prisoner. We were covered in mud and blood. We collapsed. I turned around. Where? Shorty Washington was still out there. "Shorty!" I screamed. The sound of his M60 was still going, but it was slower. Brr-tee, brr-tee. He was running low. "He's still out there," I yelled, grabbing a new magazine. "We gotta—" Henderson was there. "No," he said. "You're not. You're done." "He's my man, sir." "He's a soldier, Sergeant," Henderson said, his face hard. And then the jungle went silent. The M60 stopped. I waited. 1 second. 2. Then from the darkness a single massive roar. Brrrr-tee. Shorty's last 100 rounds. A final fuck you to the entire valley. And then an explosion. A grenade. And then silence. I fell to my knees. "Shorty, he did his job, Sergeant," Henderson said, his voice not unkind. "He was the hammer. He bought you the time. He fixed their position." Henderson turned to his radio man. "Light 'em up," he said. The sky above the valley, miles away, lit up as the first artillery shells screamed in. Henderson was finally getting his boom, but it was too late. I just stared into the darkness where my best man had been. We'd done it. We'd cut the head off the snake. We'd won, but we'd left a piece of our soul in that jungle. We'd lost a ghost. The attacks on Hill 724 stopped the next day. The VC platoon we'd hit, the one that lost its commander, its radio, and its mortars, just evaporated. They broke. We had haunted their home, and they ran. Lieutenant Henderson got his promotion. He got a medal for crippling enemy operations in the Jacto sector. In his official report, our mission never happened. We didn't exist. He said his Marines had heroically repelled a superior force, and that the resulting artillery barrage had scattered the survivors. We were ghosts. In the reports, in the jungle, in the minds of the VC. They never found Shorty Washington. He just vanished. But the Marines on the wire said that for weeks, the VC patrols would not go near that part of the jungle. They said the sector was haunted by a Ma Lawn, a great ghost, a spirit that was too angry to die. That's who we were. The Marines were the hammer, and they got the glory. We were the scalpel, the shadows. We were the men who did the impossible, who walked through their nightmares. The Viet Cong learned to fear us more than any Marine company, not because we were loud, but because we were quiet, and because we were willing to trade our souls one by one, just to prove they were never, ever safe.